Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Charles Green and I'm part of the marketing team here at Belatrix Software, and I'm going to be your host today. Firstly, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join this call. And today we're going to be providing a step-by-step guide to how you can Dockerize some common web applications. Now, we decided to focus on this topic because Docker is the most widely used provider to create containers. And containers are not really new in IT. In fact, they've been around for decades. But what Docker has done has made them much easier and much more practical to use. And particularly in a digital cloud-first environment, there are tremendous productivity and economic gains from being able to use Docker to help deploy applications rapidly into production. So to discuss this further and to dive into more detail on some of the more technical aspects of how you can be using Docker, I'm delighted to be joined by Orlando Castillo, who is a technical consultant here at Belatrix. Orlando, do you want to say a few words of introduction?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Orlando.
Great, thanks, Orlando. And before I go any further, I should mention that today's session is going to be very open. So while we're going to be presenting for much of the next 45 minutes, please feel free to ask questions where we'll be either you can ask a question either on the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen or via Twitter, where we'll be live tweeting throughout using the hashtag. You can see the hashtag at the bottom of the screen there. And for those of you not familiar with Belatrix, we are a leading provider of software development services with expertise in product and mobile application development. Our focus is on innovation and really shaping the concepts and ideas of our clients into world-class software products. And we have delivery centers in Mendoza and Buenos Aires in Argentina, in Lima, Peru, where Orlando and myself are based, and in Bogota, Colombia as well. And with that, I want to pass over to Orlando to start the presentation.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'll just get started. All right, so basically we're gonna be talking about Docker, Angular, a little bit of Vue and React, and see how you guys can basically build an app with either any of those frameworks and libraries, and then placing that app into a running container by Docker. So one of the questions you could ask is, how do you deploy an app at its highest? Well, basically, since we're having three technologies that are widely used in the market, such as Angular, Vue, and React, we basically can make use of them at its highest to build an app. And then once we have an artifact that is really light, we can actually place this artifact into a running container, which is run by Docker. So for example, Angular actually uses a command line interface called CLI, which basically is a code generator that what it does is it will help you by using command line instructions to build an app efficiently. And then you can make use of that to send all these instructions and then configure these instructions in order to run a container. In the case of Vue, also Vue has a CLI called Vue CLI, which where you can do a same process. And then React has kind of one of the most common projects they have is the Create React Apps that you can easily Google and then find this GitHub project where you can generate the apps you want. So if you notice, so they have capabilities to build applications in the same way, and they're pretty much comparable with each other. So basically here we have a diagram that is like quite close. I would say part of it is what we're going to do is we're going to have on the left side any web app, such as in this case Angular or React or even Vue, and then we need to basically build the app using libraries. Mostly they are not libraries, and then all the libraries we need will be actually compiled and built in order to be published into a server and then be exposed to the external world. So for those developers who actually use web servers in their own life, what we have basically with Nginx is actually a reverse proxy server. So what it does is basically any request we do from outside a container, what it does is actually reverse any request so that it will pass any code we do from the outside world to the container. So that's what it does. It's pretty much like Apache in a light way, or for those who are not developers, it's like using IIS. Pretty light. So basically, in this image, it's very explanatory. So basically, a container can be joined with 4 containers, and they can be grouped into a cluster server. And you can either orchestrate containers, which of course we're not going to cover, but just one of the pieces will be your app, and that's actually very explanatory. It could be either React, or you can find either the Vue logo in an example. So basically, in the case of Angular, Angular uses under the hood Webpack. So Webpack, what it does, it will actually use some technologies like tree shaking in order to make your output application really light, and that will be actually very efficient. And like I also mentioned, Vue will also use Webpack and React as well. So basically, to run this exercise demo, which is pretty much really simple, because basically the goal is actually to create an image and run it. So we need to understand a couple of concepts. What's a container? So and then the image that I previously showed you is actually very easy to help us to understand what it is in terms. It's just a running process. So imagine a container that is always running, and it's another options compared to traditional virtualization methods like virtual machines and so on. So in this case, we don't need basically we need to have actually a huge virtual machine, because all we need is just a Docker engine that will actually handle small pieces of images that are really easy to handle, easy to download from the cloud, and it will provide a lot of advantages. Another important thing to mention is that if you're a developer in your development environment, you don't need actually to go to a server to use Docker, because currently Docker offers a free version called Docker Community Edition CE that I would recommend you to download and install, and that will get you started. Actually, you can find it in their website, and even if you're a Mac user or either Windows user, you can run it without any problem. And the other concept we need to learn is what's a Docker image. Actually, basically, an image is the template of a container. Basically, an image doesn't run. In fact, an image is just, it will contain a set of instructions that are necessary to build and run a Docker container. So if you're a JavaScript programmer, think it as we're having the image like a class, and a Docker container is an object, which is the instance of the class. So basically, that's all it is. So a Docker image is a template, and a container is the instance of the template. All right, so basically, that's what I've been explaining. An image comes with a Dockerfile, which I'll show you shortly. And by the way, you can have many Docker files and many images. I will use a method that will actually make use of only one image file, and then I'll explain why this is really important and useful. I actually like this image. This is actually how the layers are distributed. Sorry. Down at the bottom, you can see the kernel, which is the heavy part. It's the one you're gonna get once you download Docker Community Edition. And then on top of that, it will build the rest of the images. By the way, the first one is based on Linux. So it's kind of you're gonna have, if you're like a Windows user, it's kind of you're gonna have a Linux version inside your Docker engine, which is actually awesome. And then on top of that, in our case, usually, JavaScript apps make use of npms, which means we need node for that. So will be the next one. And then, as I explained, nginx will help us to reverse any requests we may have. And then finally, any input and output communication with the external world will be taken care by the writable layer. And this is actually the layer that changes all the time. Yes, basically, like I said, I will use the method multistage builds. This method is, well, the biggest advantage of using multistage builds is that you can actually use multiple images and then having just one image at the very end, sorry about that, at the very end, and that actually will make sure that you only have what you need at the end. For example, we can have things like more than 1 GB of libraries, which we might not need. So since all we need in an app, in a traditional app, will be something like an external set of artifacts that will actually be really lightweight, and that's why I'm using this method. This Dockerfile, I'll show you the real Dockerfile in a bit. And these are the instructions I'll run for the demo. Also, later we'll share a bonus material where you can get more things like communication and passing environment variables to the container. This will be useful for you when you want to build your container in different environments, such as production, QA. What I mean with QA is actually quality assurance and things like that. And that's questions and answers, Charles.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Orlando. Do you want to now share the, or start with the demo?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. Yes, okay, let's go ahead with it. Basically, okay, I'll explain to you basically what we could do with an existing app to actually placing the existing app into a Docker container. So basically what I have here is a to-do app that I can actually share with you later on that was built from scratch. It was built in Angular. And basically what I'll do actually to configure a container, it's I need 3 files, 3 artifacts. So basically the first one is the one that will configure the nginx image. For this image, I need to configuration because I need to set some things like every time I request a URL, I need to redirect to a response URL. So the most important part here is this key, which actually will redirect any call to the base address, also if I add a slash, and finally any not found page will be redirected to the index page. Next, we're having the Dockerfile that we talked about. And now you will see that I have 2 stages, like I explained. So the first one will actually take care of everything that has to do with building the app in any environment, such as production in this case. So what I'm doing inside, so is using a lot of the npm commands. And if you see here, I'm using yarn, which actually builds on top of npm, and it's actually another option besides npm. And you could easily use it here because actually the Docker team chose to include yarn in their image. The second image we are using is the nginx image to publish the app. This is very straightforward. It will actually take the output from the first image, like I mark as node. It's taken actually from here. And it actually will copy the artifacts of the build application into the output folder of nginx. And that's all we need, plus a configuration that I explained at the beginning in order to reverse any request we do from the external world into the container. Make sense? Okay, and finally, there's a plus here, for those who use the git-ignore file, Docker comes with ignore file as well, and then that will help us to have an image that is really light. And in this case, we're ignoring node modules that are really heavy and we don't need. And by the way, Docker handles their versioning. So in that case, we might not need to use Git to version the Docker images. So to sum up, we only added 3 files. One is to configure the image. The other one is the one that handles all the instructions, the Dockerfile. And the latest one will help us to make our process more efficient. Okay, let's go to the commands of Docker. Can actually run them from different places. Okay, first we'll do this. We'll build the image. Basically, the command is really straightforward, and I'm using a flag that whatever comes after the flag is the name of the container, and the last parameter actually points to the location of where the Docker file is, which is the current location. So basically, I just run the image. It's already there. I actually ran the image previously, which means that second time it does it will do it fast as it is doing it right now. And for demo purposes, I think it's really convenient. And next, we are going to run our container. This is the command to run the container. It's also very explanatory. You can see the flag minus P there, and then after that we're having 2 ports. One is the local port, and the other one is the external port. It's kind of a mapping when I request from the external side to the container. So every call will be redirected from one port to the other. The process is really standardized, and I'll invite you to check it out on the internet. It's called port forwarding. And then finally, we're having the name of the container there. And I didn't mention actually that the first part of the container, which is my name, is actually my user in the Docker in the Docker repository called Docker Hub. So I'm actually right now running the container. I don't know if it's worth it. As if you guys have any questions so far, Charles.
Yep, absolutely. Just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions at the moment, to please send them to us, and you can either do so, as mentioned, via the chat box on your screen or via Twitter. And actually, Orlando, just whilst we're waiting, we do have one question which has come in, and they're talking about how you can publish the how can you publish the app to the cloud? Would you recommend using Azure, for example?
Yeah, sure. Actually, that's a good question. Thank you for asking it. Okay, I will do a couple of things with that question. Yeah, the answer is yes. Azure is one of the options you can have, Charles. And then also, besides that, there are other providers. Of course, Google have providers. Also, Amazon have their own providers. So basically, what I'll do is actually I'll share with you guys a link. The link is an article that I wrote where you can find a briefly description of a lot of providers that you can use to either orchestrate containers, store containers, like Charles asked, something like kind of publish a container using the cloud. Is that answer the question?
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Orlando.
Yes. So while I was talking, actually, you probably noticed something in the terminal. So I'll try to do another request. So we probably notice it one more time. Okay, so if you notice there's something that is being logged into the terminal. So what I actually did is I just did a request from the external world, which is outside the container, and then all the requests are logged inside the container by using Nginx. This is very amazing. So, and that means actually the container is actually running. Okay, just a little bonus right now to save a little bit of time. I'll show you the command. So whenever you either want to publish your container into any storage registry on the internet, such as Docker Hub, like I mentioned, or you want to pull your container from any place in the world by using Dockerfile, which is the other command. So you can basically do it in this way. I'll show you how it looks. Okay, this is the command that you can use to pull your image once it's stored in any repository. And then if you actually want to push it, is really obvious. It's just Docker push, and don't forget to use your username or the name of your organization. And with that, we are kind of good to go. Actually, let's try this. So imagine that you want to log into your server where you have your publish app. All right. I have this locally, and also, if I'm not mistaken, I also have this redirected into a kind of a URL that I created. Okay, so basically that's the app. Okay, you can redirect this to any URL. Right now, if we have time, I'll show you the URL. Other than that, you can see this app that I created, and I actually run an article in which I show how you can build this app from scratch using Angular. And by the way, I will invite you to take a look, because I remember maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I updated that with the very, very latest libraries. So if you want to try things like, I'm using Phone Awesome 5 and things like that. So even in Awesome, in that library, I'm using the most latest features, and I will invite you to use that app. Even if you want to build another app based on that, feel free to do it. So basically, this is a CRAP application that does something like addition, and if you want to either delete things or add more, you can actually try to do it and play with it. And also later we'll share some code to do the same with either React and Vue. So that should be it. So I don't know if you guys have more questions.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Orlando. I think it's a clear overview of what you can, how you can use Docker, for example, to really create an application, much more easily and much quicker than you could previously, right? So one question which I would have, how would you rate, for example, how does using containers, using Docker, does that help? Does it make you more efficient as a developer?
Sorry, yes, that's actually a very good question. Answer is yes. Actually, I will give you an example that happened in real life. I presented this previously for another audience, and actually we didn't have internet connection at that time. So I was using my hotspot from my cell phone. So, and then with that, I could experiment that I actually didn't take any data from my phone. It was 70 megabytes that I took. And consider that a real application for the people who are following us in the webinar, built with Angular and using Node.js, is usually more than 1 gigabyte heavy. So what we're having with an image is having something really, really efficient that we can easily, it's actually really handy because we can easily download it from whenever we are. That's one of the advantages. Other advantages I would like to mention is that Docker allows you to have versioning. So for example, if you have any problems in production like versioning, you can go to previous versions. If you want to do a hotfix, everything is there in the cloud. So it's kind of very, very standardized nowadays, really easy to handle. And finally, I know that you can handle many scenarios using backend servers like Node.js, but in this case, I was actually able to show you that using a UI interface, you can take advantage of Docker at the same time, which is a myth, but it's kind of part of the demo. That's it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Orlando. Also just looking to see if any further questions come in. We have one question. Do you have any particular resources that you would recommend to the audience to learn about Docker if they want to take what you've taken today and go further? Would you have any sources that you use or you find useful?
Sure. Actually, when I learned Docker a while ago, actually I kind of look into the Docker website, which is actually the first resource I would recommend you to look at. And also, I wrote an article which is pretty much a comparison between Docker, Angular, and Vue that we will invite you guys to have a look at. I'll share that link shortly. And basically, I can actually even, give me a second, actually, let me Google it.
And actually, that's available on the Belatrix blog, your blog.
Yes, actually, if you Google it, it will appear on somewhere on the internet, and it's there. And basically, the exercise is actually that you can Google it whenever you are, and it belongs to our blog. So basically, there are a lot of instruction comparisons. I can actually enable to update this on some kind of basis. And yeah, I would like to hear feedback from the audience and then see what we can do from there. Also, don't forget the hashtag that we're having. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would recommend that if anyone, after listening again to this webinar, if you have follow-up questions, then please do let us know. Also, Alana, just one additional question which has come in from the audience, and that is, you've kind of outlined many of the kind of advantages of Docker and why people should be using it. Do you think there are any disadvantages?
Another amazing question. Well, actually, as a developer and technical consultant in the world of technology, I would say that sometimes, well, biggest advantage, again, on the contrary, is having an isolated process, really handy, really light. But on the contrary, actually, we're currently isolating things that we call, they're not having a UI, okay? Like we're isolating no images, nginx images. Finally, we get to publish the image, but then this image is communicating with the external world. So basically, for now, its disadvantages, I would say it's a little bit headless of using Docker, because usually you don't isolate necessarily things like a browser. That scenario is not that common nowadays. For that, a lot of people use different system operating users or either a virtual machine. Hopefully, like I wrote in the article, in one of the articles I'm sharing in the link that talks about understanding containers. At the end, I talk about I made an opinion about what would happen in the future with virtual machines and containers, which from my point of view and from what I research, I think that at some point in the future, they will be pretty much comparable. Like it's kind of both trends are trying to get close to one to the other.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Orlando. And with that, I don't think we have any further questions at this moment. So I would like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to everyone who joined the call today, and a big thank you to Orlando as well for sharing your expertise and to showing, particularly the demo where you walked us through how people can use Docker with some of the common web applications that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. I'd like to reiterate, if you have follow-up questions after this call, then please do let us know. Hopefully, you can see the passion that people like Orlando have for the work that they do here at Belatrix, and how they engage with many of these new technologies to help organizations with their businesses. A recording will be available within the next 24 hours, and I invite you to check that out either on our website or on our YouTube channel as well. But with that, I would like to say thank you to everyone once again, and have a very pleasant rest of the day.